This program is brought to you by realestate.com.au, Australia's #1 address in property. With more properties for sale than anywhere else, we make it easier.
Welcome back. Let's get a preview of this weekend's auction activity. It's looking like a busy couple of days with about 3,300 auctions scheduled across the country. About 900 homes are scheduled for auction in Sydney. Almost 1,400 properties are set to go under the hammer in Melbourne. That's about 40% of the national total. Then roughly 200 apiece in Brisbane and Adelaide, plus about 130 in Canberra. Looking at the most viewed properties going to auction this weekend, out of the top 20 most viewed homes, 15 of them were in Victoria. 2 were in New South Wales, plus 2 in South Australia and 1 in Queensland. The most viewed property was 22 McFarlane Street, South Yarra in Melbourne. And the most viewed property on realestate.com this week is a luxury home in the Melbourne suburb of Ivanhoe, northeast of the CBD. This secluded family resort has 5 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, and is set on almost 6,000 square metres. The design pays homage to the architectural style of Frank Lloyd Wright's Falling Water, which is an iconic home in Pennsylvania, which rises above a waterfall. The Ivanhoe property is called La Nu, and it also showcases water. The Yarra River meanders through the backyard. There's a stepped water feature that you can walk through to get to the front door. There's also a pond and an infinity pool that cascades down a textured wall as a man-made waterfall. The mansion fuses indoor and outdoor living and has a giant glass windows which look out onto bushland. The property has a chef's kitchen, golf simulator, wine cellar, gym and floodlit tennis court. The asking price, $10.5 million to $11.5 million, which is a suburb record. Well, joining me now is Eleanor Creagh, economist with REA Group. Eleanor, thanks for your time. First, let's just start with those strong auction numbers in Melbourne. Are there any reasons why the Melbourne market has so much more property for sale this weekend than Sydney?
Well, Melbourne is the auction capital of Australia, but certainly, Australia-wide, vendors really taking advantage of the strong selling conditions, I think, and of course, the price growth that we've had over the past 12 months. And we are seeing that, Australia-wide auction volumes this week are actually more than 150% higher than this same week last year. But you're quite right, in Melbourne, they're around 250% higher than this same week last year. But, certainly it's those strong selling conditions that are really supporting vendor confidence and contributing to a seasonally higher level of properties available for sale.
Wow, so a lot of buyer demand right now across the country. And how have auction clearance rates been tracking recently as well?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we've seen that auction clearance rates have obviously been impacted by the weather. We did see that auction clearance rates came off a little bit into the end of last year with that surge in new listings that we really saw into the end of the year, a lot more choice out there. So kind of natural to see auction clearance rates trending a little bit lower. But actually, we saw that into the start of 2022, auction clearance rates have been relatively strong. But also, it's not just auction clearance rates. Sales volumes as well have been pretty strong. It's been certainly a strong start to the year, both in terms of, seller confidence, but also buyer demand. And, last year was it was a historic year for housing on many, many fronts. But 2021 actually ended the year with 40% more sales relative to 2020. So to see this year kicking off with that strong momentum again, it certainly does mean that, that the market remains pretty robust at the moment.
And property investors, are they finally starting to come back into the market and buying properties again?
Certainly they are. So we saw that in January, according to the ABS, new lending to investors increased for the 15th month in a row. So actually the share of new lending to investors is now at 33%, and that's off from a historic low, which was 23% that was recorded 12 months ago. Investors are really, back in action, you could say. And that's certainly interesting, in the context of the international borders reopening and also pandemic restrictions easing, more economic certainty. And of course, people albeit slowly returning to the office. Certainly we're seeing on realestate.com.au the share of inquiry from investors is actually hovering around a 3-year high at the moment. And, you know, certainly when we look at those inner city markets, we know that rental demand has really tapered since the pandemic began due to the fact that we've had closed international borders, less migrant demand, all those international students who typically live close to universities, and of course the fact that restrictions have maybe made inner city living relatively less attractive. But with that trend starting to reverse somewhat, with the international borders reopened now, we are seeing that investors are very much back in action, so to speak.
Yeah, and what does it mean for renters themselves? Is it much tougher now to find a rental property at the moment?
Yeah, well, that's another factor. So whilst we're seeing for those looking to buy, there's certainly a lot more choice at the moment. It's a very different picture when we look at the rental market. So actually, since the onset of the pandemic, total rental listings Australia-wide have really been trending lower to actually sit around 20% lower than pre-pandemic levels at the moment. And that's actually even more stark in Sydney and Melbourne. So in Sydney, rental listings are at their lowest level since December 2017, and in Melbourne, they're at their lowest level since August 2020. So it certainly does mean that there's some tough competition out there for renters, and we are seeing those rental price pressures coming through.
Eleanor Creagh, economist with REA Group, thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me.